Okay, so we are here for another keynote session with Dr. Christine Coombe. Dr. Christine Coombe and I have known each other for quite a long time now. She's a very close friend of mine and also an amazing speaker, amazing writer. She has written so many books, but let me formally introduce you to Dr. Christine Coombe. Her topic today first is the quest for academic excellence in ELT. Dr. Christine Coombe has a PhD in foreign second language education from the Ohio State University. She is currently an associate professor of general studies at HCT Dubai Men's College. She is also the former testing and measurements supervisor at UAE University and assessment coordinator of Zayed University. Christine has published 50 plus books in various topics in TESOL and ELT. Dr. Coombe serves as the editor of Language Teaching Research Quarterly 2017 to present, and as the editor of the Scopus Indexed Q1 Brief Reports section of the Asia TEFL Journal 2016 to present. Dr. Christine has lived and worked in the Gulf for the past 30 years. In this capacity, she has served as the president and conference chair of TESOL Arabia, formerly one of the largest TESOL affiliates in the world. During her tenure in the Middle East, she has won many awards, including 2002 SPAN Fellowship for Research in Second Foreign Language Assessment, 2002 to 3 TOEFL Outstanding Young Scholar Award, TOEFL Board Grant for 2003 and 4, 2005 and 6, 2007 to 8, and 2009 to 10 for her work, it means continuous, for her work in delivering assessment training assessment in developing countries. She served on the TESOL Board of Directors as Convention Chair for Tampa 2006 and was the recipient of the Chancellor's Teacher of the Year for 2003 and 4. She served as TESOL International Association President 2011 and 12, and was a member of the TESOL Board of Directors 2010 to 2013. Dr. Christine has received the British Council's International Assessment Award as well for 2017 and was named to TESOL's 50 at 50, which recognizes professionals who have made significant contributions to the TESOL profession within the past 50 years. Dr. Coombe is the 2018 recipient of the James E. Lattice Award, which recognizes exemplary service to TESOL. Her most recent honor was being named to the U.S. Department of State's 30 at 30, which English language specialists in 2021. This list recognizes LSPECs who have made an impact on the teaching and training of English language teachers around the world in the last 30 years. It's an honor, Dr. Coombe, to have you as one of our keynote speakers. It's always been an honor, and more especially because it's an interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary conference. Please welcome her with a big round of applause.
Thank you, Rana. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here with you today to talk about something that's a relatively new interest for me, and that's thinking about academic excellence. Here, what day? It's Saturday, right? This is all your weekend. So I know you're interested in academic excellence. Why? Because you're using your weekend time to get your much needed professional development. So let's have a look at what I found in my journey to thinking about the impact that academic excellence has on us as educators. So you might be wondering why this topic. Well, we're going to start with a little bit of rationale for why I chose to engage in some research on academic excellence. We're going to start out by, I really always like starting out by providing definitions because I think that situates the topic in context. We're going to review some of the research and literature on the life cycle of a career teacher through career phase research. And then we're going to look at some of the elements that you can choose to look at in terms of your own academic excellence. And for me, the three most important ones are teaching, scholarly output, and service. Then we're going to look at how we measure our impact as English language teaching professionals. And we're going to do that through defining some career defining moments, because research shows that how you choose to recognize excellence lies in how you retrospectively look back at career defining moments. And then I'm going to finish off with what I hope will be some helpful strategies for those of you who strive for more or increased academic excellence. So I think we've got a highly charged agenda, so let's get started. So why this topic? Well, for some reason, even back in high school, I always wanted to achieve excellence. It's always been one of my goals. And my childhood memories date back to middle school. I always wanted to be excellent in something. However, way back then, and even well into my career, at some point, I never really had a plan on how I would do that. However, I was fortunate to have advisors or people in my life who kind of guided me in the direction that I now find myself here today. Now, as a teacher, I fell into teaching. I didn't go to school to be a teacher. Like many, you know that there's a lot of research that shows why we become teachers, right? And some of the most common reasons that people go into teaching include for altruistic reasons. How many of you, with a show of hands, went into teaching because of a desire to make a difference, an altruistic reason? Now that might be, maybe that wasn't the initial impetus to do that, but maybe it is now. Some people go into teaching because they come from a family of teachers. Do we have anybody who comes from a family of teachers? All right. Okay. What are some other ELT? One of the main reasons that people want to be an English language teacher or a TEFL teacher is they want to travel the world. Anybody? Okay. And remember, you can have more than one reason. Okay. Yet another is life of the mind. Life of the mind is the idea that if you surround yourself with young people, it will keep you young. Certainly now at my age, that's definitely one of my reasons. Now, when I was TESOL president, one of the great things that entailed was that I got to visit English language teachers at conferences around the world. And during my presidential year, I went to the TESOL symposium in Beijing. And I interacted with, TESOL or TEFL gods and goddesses. And one of the really major players was sitting in the front row of my plenary at that event. I'm sure you've all heard of David Noonan. Well, I was doing a talk on characteristics of effective teaching. And when I got through the slide on the reasons that we become teachers, he raised his hand and he said, "Christine, you've forgotten one." And I said, "David, what is that?" And he said, "The accidental teacher." Now, the accidental teacher is someone who they didn't go into teaching to be a teacher, but they find themselves in a teaching situation and they really enjoy themselves doing it. And then they decide to kind of like pivot and go into that direction and get trained. And I think if David Noonan could admit to being an accidental teacher, I'm going to admit to being one too. Do I have any more of you in the audience? Okay. Okay, great. So I fell into teaching, really liked it, and my quest to achieve academic excellence in my job was gradual. Okay. Then rewind to about 2 years ago. It was during the pandemic. I think the November of the pandemic, I received an email from past president of TESOL, Yilin Sun, inviting me to write a book about my contributions to the field of language assessment. And the title of the series was Foreign Language Teacher Education and Development, Selected Works of Renowned TESOL Experts. And I felt really good to receive that email for 2 words. Can you think what they are from the title? Renowned is the first one, and experts. You got it. So I thought, wow, am I a renowned TESOL expert? It was really flattering. And sorry for my big introduction, but I thought Rana should kind of go through all my greatest hits of my profession since I am talking about academic excellence. So I thought about, and the premise of this series is that you pick what you think are your 20 most impactful publications in a specific area in the field, and you reflect upon your contributions to that field. And I thought, wow, here I am being invited to contribute to this series. So I got to thinking about, first of all, do I have 20 impactful publications? And of course I did, because I don't assume that I would have been invited if they hadn't looked into my publication record. At that time as well, I was on the verge of a very milestone birthday, which I passed last July. I turned 60. So I thought, isn't the age of 60 the time to look at what you've done retrospectively? So that was kind of the impetus for me thinking about this. Now, a bit of a disclaimer before I move on is that just because I'm here talking about academic excellence does not mean that I have achieved all there is to achieve in terms of excellence. I have done a few things over the past 30 to 40 years that I'm proud of, that I really think have been contributions, but it by no means that I'm perfect. Okay, so that's where I'm coming from this presentation. So that's my rationale for the topic. So as I like to do, I like to define things to situate them in context. So I looked at what the word excellence means. And of course, there's my favorite is the top one, the way we tell students never to define something, to define excellence, which means the quality of being excellent. I wasn't happy with that definition. But some of the popular refrains that I found in definitions were someone or something that has the quality of excellence or extremely good in some way or in something. It also refers to someone who achieves the highest levels, something superior, above what is expected, and something that exceeds all expectations. And oftentimes the words that are associated with excellence, or the adjectives rather, high quality, worth, merit, distinction. So I came to the conclusion that I couldn't really find a definition that I liked. But one of the things I thought about was that excellence is how you define it, right? So I went from that to looking at a framework that I really like. Many of you might be familiar with Orlick's Wheel of Excellence. And Orlick basically said that human excellence can occur in virtually all domains of life, and that it is guided by a number of mental factors. So he developed a framework, which I'll show you a visual representation in a minute, of 7 critical elements of excellence. And at the center of this framework are commitment and belief. Belief in yourself, belief in what you're doing, etc. And surrounding that are full focus, the ability to conjure up positive imagery, being mentally ready, being able to control distractions, and being able to give and accept constructive evaluation. So these 7 elements are part of Orlick's Wheel of Excellence, which you can see here. So this is kind of like, if you will, my conceptual and theoretical framework of excellence. Now, in my research on this, another important aspect of excellence seems to come from where you are as a person in life and in your career. So let's take a brief look at some of the research out there on career phase. And there's a lot of it, and much of it was done in the 1980s. So it's not new in any way. And there were 4 major contributors. Here they are on the slide, coming, the Huberman research, Fessler, Sykes, and Day, coming from different parts of the world. And their major empirical focus way back, starting in the 80s, was on presenting models of teacher career trajectories, as well as looking for patterns in which teachers' work lives developed. So I'm going to take a few minutes and share with you some of the major career phase frameworks or guidelines. And then I'm going to share the one that I feel is the most useful. Way back in the 50s, Super identified 4 stages of a teacher's career, and they were exploration, establishment, maintenance, and disengagement. And the major research focus from this research was teachers do not proceed through stages in a linear manner. And if you think about those stages, you would probably agree. Huberman, much later, put forward a 5-stage career model that was specifically geared towards teachers with career entry, stabilization within the profession, experimentation, and then conservatism and disengagement. Moving on to Fessler's career phase, again, which developed, I think, pretty much simultaneously with Huberman, pre-service induction, competency building, enthusiastic, growing, career frustration, becoming stable and stagnant, career wind down, and career exit. Now, a more lighthearted view of career stage comes to us from one of my favorite websites. Maybe some of you know it, Teach Thought. Have you ever seen things? This website is a lot of the things are authored by Hake, and they basically say the pride of qualifying to be a teacher and moving into the classroom. Then you're in the classroom and it's survival mode for those first few years. Once you relax and are able to cope with the demands of the job, there's experimentation, but yet disillusionment, rebellion are phases as well as ongoing mastery. Now, what I find, and I hope you have noticed that the last couple of stages in all of these career phase research, what are they? Are they positive? Are they negative? They're kind of negative right here: disillusionment, rebellion, career wind down, or whatever. So I thought this is an interesting trend, because I don't think, yeah, because you have that mic turned on, that's why it's following you. So you can turn that off and then it should like wind around. Or no problem, you can keep the focus on you as long as people can hear me. So having said all that with those negative steps, I'd like to share with you one career phase trajectory, which comes to us in the year 2000 from Steffi and colleagues, which is called the life cycle of a career teacher. And as I describe these cycles, I'd like you to think about where you are in that particular life cycle. Okay, so novice, apprentice, professional, expert, distinguished, and emeritus. Let's look at each one in more depth. So a novice teacher is someone who's in the pre-service stage. They're oftentimes learning to be a teacher in a teacher education program. They're usually hesitant and unsure, but at this stage, their confidence, maybe through doing their practice teaching, they begin to develop a little bit of confidence. An apprentice usually occurs when you're given your first classroom. And most of the time it lasts for the first 2 to 3 years of your teaching career. You're characterized by being energetic, enthusiastic, eager, idealistic, and passionate about helping your students achieve success. The professional teacher is where your self-confidence begins to grow exponentially, mainly due to the positive feedback that you're receiving from your students in your own classes. And this is where you begin to seek opportunities to grow and further develop. And you do this through the observation of others, through collaboration, or through seeking a mentor who can help you with some issues you may or may not have in your classroom. So those are the first stages. The last 3, expert teacher, is where you're comfortable in the classroom, you anticipate student response and growth, you modify readily and adjust your teaching based on what's happening or based on the career growth and development that you're experiencing. You're competently able to support, facilitate, and nurture growth and development, not only in your students, but in yourself as well. The distinguished teacher is a teacher who begins to have an impact beyond the walls of the classroom and does the job well, but also actively contributes to the profession. You can do that in many different ways: through conferences, through presenting, through teacher training, through publication, through research. The emeritus teacher is someone who retires from teaching, but continues to help develop the profession. They take on new roles and identities and new ways to serve others, and they pretty much celebrate a lifetime of achievement. How many of you know someone who's technically retired, but they seem to do more in retirement than they did in their regular jobs. We all can probably pinpoint someone at each of these stages. So let's look with a show of hands. Do we have any novice teachers that are learning to students in teacher education programs? Okay, thank you. Do we have any that would classify themselves as apprentices? Okay. How about professional teachers? Okay. All right, expert teachers. Okay, I go back and forth between expert and distinguished teacher, quite frankly. Do we have any distinguished teachers? Okay. Any emeritus teachers who are technically retired but still attending conferences or presenting? I dream of the day when I can call myself emeritus. All right, so what are the major findings on career phase? Well, there's considerable variation in the amount of time that you go through each phase, like how many years, for example. There's also the finding that teachers can miss stages or skip stages, and teachers can revert back to stages, or teachers can remain in the same stage throughout their life, never progressing and never backsliding. I think for me, the teachers can revert to earlier stages happened when the pandemic struck. You know, I found myself sent home on March 10th. And I work in the higher colleges of technology, so we do online stuff. We did a lot of stuff. So I think I was better prepared than the average person who was sent home and said, figure out how to teach online. But I still remember sitting in my office, literally, and I remember one day, a particularly bad day, when I couldn't figure out how to circle a word on our platform. Okay, have you been there? So luckily, a student figured out what I was trying to figure out, and he sent me a private message with a screenshot of what to do. I wish I remembered that student's name, and I was so thankful for that student, but I thought to myself, here you are, like 35 years in the classroom, and something so easy that you don't think about stumps you. And I have to tell you that I found myself in tears more than once, being unable to do things. So I embarked on, like all of us did, so many online trainings, online conferences, and I didn't really feel confident until like a month later when I learned how to do the basics. So the first stage, according to the literature, to determine how you define or achieve excellence is to determine where you are in terms of career phase. So there are a number of mediating factors because achieving excellence means sustaining your commitment to teaching and to the profession. And it has been found that your career phase, where you are in your career, has an impact on that, and also the context of the scenarios in which you work and live as well. So there has to be, according to Day and his colleagues, interaction between three dimensions. The professional dimension is basically what are your beliefs on what is an effective teacher. The situated dimension is related to your own lives at school and at work, and the personal, which is definitely related to outside of the workplace. And it is how these three are interwoven that it helps you determine academic excellence or where you are in the journey. So in thinking about, okay, if teachers want to achieve excellence, what are some of the areas that they're going to achieve excellence in? Now, those of you who were here this morning, you saw Dr. Wafa talk about which aspect here, which aspect? You can't answer, Wafa. Yes, okay, so predominantly on service, how service can do things. But I feel that there are a number of areas within teaching and within scholarly output as well as service that can help you. And I'm going to take just one slide each to go through some of these with another disclaimer that yes, there are probably things I've forgotten to include, but you know, we only have 40 minutes here today. So with regard to teaching, what are some elements of academic work that you could be engaging in? Well, it is readily accepted that the teacher engages in a variety of classroom activities. How many? or how often we change activities, not much research has been done on that. And certainly we need to consider both online and face-to-face nowadays. Also, we are judged by how successfully we complete all aspects of our jobs in terms of with our students, whether that be advising or whatever, and within the classroom. We need to also, in addition to teaching, participate in course materials and assessment development. We need to do all the administrivia that comes along with our teaching, taking attendance, whatever we have to do. And in this part of the world, I know in Dubai, we definitely have to be able to use technology effectively. I'm not sure what the context is here in Kuwait, but just by looking at some of the classrooms, I would think it's important as well. We need to engage in professional development, and now it didn't used to be quantifiable, but now at my own institution, we get a ranking in terms of how many hours of professional development we can prove that we've attended. And that professional development is both self-directed, whereas we go out and search for our own developmental needs, but also other directed as well, things that our institution tells us we have to do. We need to do things like participate in shared teaching practices, like peer observation, like other collaborative efforts as well. Contribute to assessment, not only in developing assessments, but giving feedback on assessments and moderation of students' assessed work. And of course, serve as both formal and informal advisors to our students and other stakeholders in the process. So I'm sure you could probably add at least another 10 or 15 things that we need to do to prove that we are achieving excellence in teaching. Let's move now to scholarly output. Doing research to better inform our teaching practices is one element of how we are evaluated and what is expected of us to achieve excellence. Organizing, presenting, and participating in conferences like this one, another important aspect. And with my own institution, now the expectation is that you do all this, but then you involve students in the process. So happy to see you, your team, Rana, having such good student involvement. Publishing work, not only in journals, but book chapters, books, whatever, and also with students. That's now becoming very important for my institution. Applying for, receiving, and carrying out research grants, both internal to your institution, but also external grants as well. And developing creative projects, inventions, patents, and copyrights as well is another thing that we often find difficult to do because we're English teachers. It would be easier to, to create something, to invent something if we were in a different field, but these are some of the expectations. Now, the third one, can you remember what it was? Teaching scholarly output? Service, perfect. So serving on committees, and the committees, we had a good little introduction about what types of committees people serve on, not only for our department, for our institution, but then external to the workplace from professional associations. Delivering professional development, it's not enough to just engage in PD, but we also have to deliver it to our colleagues, to the wider academic community, etc. Engaging in student activities. Does anyone here is the advisor for a student club or a student activity? Okay. So these kinds of things, and it's not only at the club level, but it's department, program, and campus level. Serving as a mentor. Any mentors in the audience? In a formalized mentoring role? Okay. And promoting the institution at a global and a local level is an expectation as well. So those are the elements of academic work as I see them. Let's turn now to how we can measure our impact. This whole topic of interest became of interest to me when I edited a book that came out in 2020 called Professionalizing Your English Language Teaching. And one of the chapters that was submitted for publication was a chapter by two individuals that are currently based in Singapore, Willie Renandia and Trin Min. And this quote really affected me. So they talked about true academic impact as being measured by how well the research is received, but also the extent to which is used by fellow academics, but also by what kinds of changes it makes beyond academia. And I think that last part, the changes it makes beyond academia, is really impactful, at least for me. Now, in looking at impact, most of the stuff out there pertains to research impact. Okay, so that's what I'm going to focus on for a couple of slides here. And the key measures of research impact are the quality of the journal that you publish in, and the number of times articles in that journal are cited, and altmetrics. I'll talk about altmetrics in a few minutes. And personal measures like the H index. Now, I had never heard of an H index until I read this article. Okay. Do any of you know what an H index is? Yeah. Okay, well, you're going to find out, because it's really something that has changed the way I view what I do, especially in research and publication. Okay, wait, did I miss one? No. Okay. All right. Author IDs are important as well. Many of you probably you have your profile up on any of the number of author IDs. Now, author IDs are programs that you belong to. You upload your information, any publications you have, any research you're engaged in. Any of you have an ORCID ID? You should look into that, because now lots of jobs are requiring you to have one of these. How about Google Scholar profile? Okay, that as well. And if you want to know what your H index is, you're going to have a Google Scholar profile. These are ways that you can make sure that you get credit for the scholarly work that you do, and that if someone has a similar name to you, your references, your publications won't be miscredited to someone else. So it's really important to do. Some author profiling services, Vitae, which is associated with the Chronicle of Higher Education, very important in North America. Academia EDU, any of you have Academia EDU? How about ResearchGate? All of these author ID programs correlate very well and are linked to oftentimes your Google Scholar and your ORCID profile. Okay, the impact factor of a journal is basically the most well-known measurement of journal quality, and it measures citations of published work over the past 2 years. So what, might you ask, is an acceptable journal impact factor? Well, in the research out there, anything over 10 is considered to be excellent, and anything over 3 is considered to be good. So in looking up the most famous, at least in my view, the most impactful journals within TEFL or TESOL, I find that, well, TESOL Quarterly or TQ, Applied Linguistics, Studies in Second Language Acquisition, the Modern Language Journal, and there are, at least as of 18 months ago, the current journal impact factors. All right, the H index. Mine is 24. Now, what is an H index? It means if you have an H index of 20, then that means you have 5 papers that have at least 20 citations each. What I like about my research into the H index is that it combines productivity, meaning the number of papers you have actually written, and impact, the number of citations of each, okay? And it combines those two in a single number. Now, both productivity and impact are required for a high H index. And so if you have a few cited papers or a long list of papers with only 1 citation each, you will not have a high H index. Also, if many of you are looking at what your H index is, if you're new to the profession, you're not likely to have a high H index because you won't have a long publication. You know, papers have to be out there for a few years to rack up, well, 20 or 30 citations each. So another thing about the H index is it does not reward one-hit wonders. A one-hit wonder is someone who publishes one paper and there's a huge number of citations, but they never follow that up with any other academic work. Another thing I like about the H index is that it does not count self-citations, because at the beginning of the H index measurement, people would be citing all of their work and what articles to rack up other citations. So it's only citations of people not included in the author list that actually count. So how do you find out what your H index is? Well, you go to your Google Scholar page. Here is mine. And if you can see right here, that's that whole skill that I can't circle anything on the screen. If you look here, cited by, you'll see the little bar graph, citations, H index, and I-10 index. The H index is in the middle. So, okay, so I was thinking about when I first looked at this, I was a 20. That was my H index. And I thought 20, how good is that? So then I looked up, what does a 20 mean? And I found an H index of 20 is only good. And I thought to myself, 20 or 30 years of killing myself, and I'm only good? Okay, so I was a little bit deflated. 40 is outstanding and 60 is truly exceptional, according to the person who brought the H index into our lives, Hirsch. But I felt marginally better when I found that 84% of Nobel Prize winners in physics had an H index of at least 30. So I thought, hey, 20 is closer to 30 than it is to 0. So and one of the things that's difficult is that it's hard to move up a point. You have to have a lot of citations. So since I first discovered this, I have moved up 4 points, and I thought, and everybody acts amazed about that. So I'm trying to think, how's that happening? And I have come to the conclusion that I am publishing more in open access journals where everybody around the world has access to your work, so you can have more citations. So I encourage you to go find out what yours is. They basically say an assistant professor has usually around a 5, and an associate professor should have at least an 8 H index. But again, one of the only things about being older and having more publications is that it can help your H index. So you youngsters out there, you might need to wait a few years before you have a higher H index. So we're going to look now at altmetrics. Altmetrics are other ways to measure your impact, but they are not meant to replace the journal impact factors, the author IDs, the H index. They are meant to complement the more traditional measures. So what are some examples of altmetrics? Well, anytime somebody mentions you on Facebook, Twitter, online news, or social media sites. Anytime people export your citations to programs like Mendeley and Zotero, downloads of full text that you've written or software that you've developed, any comments on blogs or other online formats, and page views if you have a website. So I have been looking into how one can increase their altmetrics, but I've only found, I've been looking through journals lately, and I've been finding altmetrics on publications out there, but not pertaining to people. So maybe next year we'll do something on altmetrics. So journal level, article level metrics, most famous are, of course, the journal impact factor, Schemago, rank indicator, Scopus indexing is really big in my institution. So anything you want to do, you want to make sure it's Scopus index, and of course the high Q factors, Q1 to Q2 should be your goal, at least if you're applying for promotion at my institution. Now, the relative importance of a journal is also important. The journals that are in the top 25% are deemed to be the most impactful, and of course, the lesser 25%, the least impactful. So I'm going to take us now to some career defining moments. In my research on determining where you are in terms of academic excellence, it has been noted that looking back retrospectively on your career can help you in determining what decisions you made over the course of your career that brought you where you are today, either positively or negatively. And as I listened to my bio today, as you read it, I questioned what is on this slide, because a lot of stuff that you mentioned as my greatest hits or greatest achievements, I do not mention them on my career defining moments. So this slide might be a little bit different after I go home and do more reflection. So looking back on my career, what are some of the most important decisions or milestones in my career? So sorry, I'm going to do maybe a little bit of humble bragging now. Okay, please excuse me. So the first career milestone for me was my decision to go to university. When I was in high school, I was a jock. I was into sports because, and to admit this, especially on camera, it was not cool to be smart way back then. So I actually hid what intelligence I had. I hid. And by some strange reason, without even trying, I got in the top 10 of my high school graduating class. But I tried to hide that because being smart, you were a nerd or you were a dork, basically. So my decision to go to university wasn't an automatic one, because in my junior year of high school, my parents told me, because my sister was very ill, which resulted in us having to sell our house and putting the money and most of our resources into getting her healthy. So they told me, we're here to support you on anything we can support you with, but we can't pay for you to go to college. So if you want to go to college, you need to find a way to do so. So, okay, I wasn't as tenacious then as I am now. So I thought, okay, I'll just be, because I wanted to travel, I'll just be a flight attendant. We called them flight attendants back then, okay? So, because I wanted to travel and this was one way to do it. Okay, so, and then I heard that if I joined the military, I could do 4 years and then get a free degree. So I thought, okay, let's join. I can't remember which one I wanted to do. So I was in discussions with our neighbor who was a recruiter for one of the 4 military things. So he said, go home for lunch and then come back and we'll fill out the paperwork and you'll be leaving for the army or whatever next week. So I went home for lunch, and what did I find in the mailbox? I'd like to say it was a scholarship, but it was actually just a tuition waiver to participate in the university's track and field team, which was my sport. So I thought, wow, a scholarship. But it wasn't much money, but it was just enough to think, my tuition would be covered. How could I cover other aspects? So that set me on a different path. I never went back to see that recruiter, and I regret that, because I should have gone back and say, oh no, I'm going to college now, not in 4 years. So the decision for me to even go to university, something that is so connected to my identity now, was the first milestone for me. And while there in my first semester, changing from what my parents wanted me to study, which was business administration, to foreign languages and then TESOL, was the other thing that, I was not on speaking terms with my parents for a few months. But then when they saw my grades from C's go up to A's, they were okay. I went through my graduate education, and when I was doing my doctorate, I was lucky enough to find the topic that I wanted to do for my doctoral research early on. So I didn't have to search for 4 years finding something I wanted to study, which saved me a lot of time. Then fast forward into my career, I came to the Gulf right after my doctorate, and then I joined TESOL Arabia, the leadership. Then I joined Toastmasters leadership, and then of course TESOL International Association. So if there's one main how shall I say it, milestone or career defining moment, it was when I became involved with professional association work. And I pretty much credit lots of what I have done in my life or in my career with my joining a professional association. So do we have anybody here on the TEFL Kuwait board in any kind of capacity, committees, anything? Okay. I can't stress enough what opportunities you will find in that kind of work. And I think you can agree with me, Wafa and Rana as well. So then came the birth and then subsequent death of a conference I developed and ran for 16 years called CTELT. I think a lot of you are too young to remember the days of the Current Trends in English Language Testing Conference, which in its heyday drew 1,000 people free of charge for anybody who wanted to go. But after 16 years, the money wasn't there, so I had to let it die, much to my regret. Then chartering a student teacher club at my own institution, a Toastmasters club, and then a club called the Global Local Club, which combined travel, educational activities for students and teachers together. Moving from English language teaching into general studies teaching helped me enormously, because it was at that point when I was, I think, looking back, going into burnout from doing the same thing, and that provided kind of life into what I was doing, moving to teaching research methods, ethics, leadership, but in English as a medium of instruction. And then, of course, my continued work with many worldwide associations like TESOL Arabia, like the US State Department, like the British Council, the ELT Society, TESOL Gulf, and the International Baccalaureate. So associations are a key issue or a key milestones in my career defining moments. I think we've got some time, so I'd like to find out what career defining moments. Can you think of one career defining moment? I know the youngins, you probably are too young to remember key defining moments, but what about some of us veterans? What are some career defining moments that have had an impact on you? Yes, Wafa. Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
So that's why, yeah, I would say sitting up. It's one, I think sitting
Thank
up
you.
associations is one milestone, I would say.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
We've got time for one more because I still have a few slides, so hang on. Go ahead, Lala. Layla.
Definitely the professional development like TESOL Arabia.
Yay. Okay.
TESOL Arabia
Mhm.
was for me one of the first time that I joined back in 2009. Was a finding moment that I would feel fit from United States to move to the Gulf region, and it's a very great organization that you can find yourself networking, doing research, serving the community, and be effective in your field.
Mhm. And when I mentioned earlier that on this slide full of career defining moments, I haven't mentioned a single publication or an award. And I thought, I need to either rethink my career defining moments or look deeply into what has really impacted me in my career. So now we're going to spend just a few minutes on some strategies that might help you achieve academic excellence. The first is, and you're not going to like it, expect to work hard. Personally, I don't know any lazy people who I would consider at the degree of academic excellence that I define as excellence. So my favorite motto is Henry Ford's, the best never rest. And unfortunately, I think if you want to achieve and sustain levels of academic excellence, you're going to have to devote a few evenings, a few weekends, and a few maybe vacation days to achieving all you do. Because now our jobs are such that It's just enough during work to do our jobs. If we want to serve associations, committees, that we have to relegate a little bit of our free time to. This all relates to discipline and motivation to achieve. Another one, of course, we all know, and one of the reasons why teachers become teachers is they love learning. So I think it's really important that you never forget your own learning goals as well. Having a plan, don't be like me all those years ago where I kind of stumbled into, the right career path. For some lucky people like me, it happened, but for others, it might not. So try to have a plan. Work on things to be better organized, to be more productive, to have better time management skills, because these characteristics will feed into any kind of excellence that you may or may not achieve. Pursue and engage in personal and professional development. I know that lots of people I used to work with, they would talk to me about going to conferences, and they would say things like, well, I'm not going to a conference unless someone pays for me to go. And I would always think, because for me, 10 years post PhD, I invested in myself to go to conferences. So I knew what made a good conference presentation. I developed a field of expertise so that the next 10 years and beyond, people would invite me to give talks and pay for, maybe not pay me, but pay for my expenses to go. So don't expect people to know of you and your expertise unless you get out there and show people what you know and can do. Continue goal setting, so important, and also developing habits that are correlated with academic excellence. For example, reading. I was kind of shocked this morning in the session by students when a student said, I have never read a book. And I'm kind of convinced that video games might be kind of a way to learn, but I'm thinking, I was kind of like not feeling sorry for them, but I thought how sad, because for so many years, my life revolved around books, not just reading books, but listening to books, etc., and writing them in the last few years. So reading is important, whether we like to read or not. Associating with people who build you up. There's research out there in the business world that says we develop the characteristics of the top 5 people we spend the most time with. So don't hang with, with lazy people or unproductive people or ones that engage in behaviors that aren't necessarily productive. Also, knowing what your time wasters are. I readily admit that I watch too much iTunes, Netflix, and OSN. I readily admit that. I used to say to myself, oh, well, you're older and you need to watch TV so that you can create rapport and have discussions with students. So I fooled myself into believing that my Netflix addiction was to create rapport with my students. But now the students come to me and say, Miss, what are your recommendations? I have the established expertise as the one who watches the most Netflix in my classes. So know what your time wasters are and, try to minimize the time you spend. Seek out people, mentors, if you will, who have the skills you want to develop. I definitely need a mentor, and I think I'm going to ask you, Rana, to help me with that program with Discord and also the creation of posters. I wish so much I had graphic skills to create posters. Engage in extracurricular activities or hobbies that you enjoy. And I'm going to say Netflix is one of my hobbies. So I feel guilty about the number of hours I spend watching, but it's my hobby, so I'm going to cut myself some slack. We've heard also today about the importance of emotional intelligence. So kind of like learning about, especially the core of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. That's especially important. Again, taking care of yourself, getting enough sleep, right diet and exercise, self-care and well-being practices, being mindful and engaging in reflection are all good practices that we need to be doing, spending more time on. I also read research that people spend more time, they take better care of their cars than they often do of themselves. So let's not be that type of person. So allowing time for you to recharge more fully is another of my recommendations. I use my vacations to decompress, and if you don't answer email while you're on vacation, you won't get a lot of emails. That's the trick of not having so much to do. When you don't send any emails, no one responds. So use your vacations to decompress. I wish one of my dreams as an educator is to be able to take a sabbatical. Not sure if you all know what a sabbatical is, because I don't seem to find any place in the Gulf where they offer sabbaticals. That's where you get, like, you can take a semester or a year off, engage in a big research project or write a book, and you get paid, not full salary, but some of your salary. Being adaptable, open to change is so important, and this is especially true as you get older. Believing in yourself as well. Being and staying humble on your way up is so important. And you know, I try to do this, but then people like Rana, they give me such a nice introduction. I think, is she describing me? Sometimes I think, you know, sometimes people say such nice things to you. I really don't want to get a big head or become an egomaniac. So being and staying humble is really important. So because if you're humble, you will be approachable, and it will be better for you in the long term. And finally, never giving up is important. There are certain things there's one thing, defeat is never defeat unless you accept it as such. For me, the seminar at sea is the thing that I have been talking about for 20 years. You might be wondering, what is this seminar at sea, Christine? Well, it's where you take a group of students or a group of teachers on a PD opportunity on a cruise ship, you sail around, you combine travel and having fun with sea days where you're on the ship doing some kind of training. This is my dream. I had a one-day seminar at sea in the Leadership and Management SIG in Tisol, Arabia a few years ago. But the seminar at sea is something that I will not give up on. So maybe TEFL Kuwait, we could combine, get on a cruise ship around Greece or Turkey or the Caribbean, or the Mediterranean, and plan if you could find a sponsor for that, Rana, wouldn't that be great? So that's my dream. That's the thing I'm never really giving up on. So the quest for academic excellence never really ends. And I'd like to finish this session with you today with words that are meaningful and impactful for me. And these are words by Oldman. Achieving academic excellence is 4 things. It's risking more than others think is safe, caring more than others think is wise, dreaming more than others think is practical, and expecting more than others think is possible. So with those words, I wish you the best of luck on your own personal and professional journey to academic excellence. I think we have some time for a couple of questions or comments. Oh, good. 5 minutes. I'm going to leave you with my email. If you want a copy of this PowerPoint, all you have to do is email me. Give me one day, though. Give me at least till I get back to Dubai.
Running soon after. Yes.
She was like, not a question. I just wanted to.
Any questions?
Right, yes.
Yes, Wafa.
Right, regarding the high index, few years back, until I was in that very nice training at Abu Dhabi University, talking about a metric, talking about quality of publications. Until that time, which was a few years back, the high index article by Hirsch has been it has been the only publication that was cited hundreds of times. So it had the index of 1. So the high index article had the only, so which was very funny and nice idea about the effect and the impact of the high index itself. And regarding again these professional development, you talk about the seaside and you talk about the sea seminar, where we are frequently planning to make these, and also we had been in the canal as well, trying also to share some ideas. But yes, definitely we agree that it's very nice to have all of these ideas is, which are relevant to the profession somewhere else beyond the boundaries of the university.
Mhm.
And finally, regarding sabbatical leave, there is in the government institutions, the UAEU, there is, and
Mhm.
even inside university, there is of 1 semester, something like that.
A sabbatical.
If it's sabbatical, we can talk. It comes after, it comes under different names, but I
Uh-huh.
can chat to you about these. Thank you.
Yes. I think I'm going to have one, even if I have to pay myself.